The wind never stops in Antarctica. It howls like a thing alive, tearing across the ice, rattling the corrugated siding of the research outposts like skeletal fingers. You get used to it, eventually, or you stop hearing it. Sergeant Lucas Vex had stopped hearing it. He stood on the outer watch deck of Station Morrow, the last U.S. military presence this far south, his white camo hood pulled tight over his face. He scanned the horizon with infrared binoculars. Nothing but endless ice and darkness and the low, humming blink of sensor poles stabbing through the frost. 3 weeks ago, a Norwegian science team 20 miles out radioed in a distress call. Static-filled, garbled, terrified. Only 3 words had come through clearly. They are feeding. The station went dark 5 minutes later. Lucas volunteered to be part of the recon team sent to investigate, but the transport crashed in a storm on approach. Out of the 6 who boarded, only 2 survived. Him and a private named Curran, young, twitchy, and already fraying at the edges. They trekked 5 miles through whiteout to get back to Station Morrow. The others never made it out of the wreckage. Curran hadn't slept since. Now it was Lucas's turn on watch. Midnight shift. The kind where even frostbite feels like a distraction from the silence. Red indicator blinked across the snowfield. Motion alert. Lucas raised the binoculars again. Thermal picked up a shape, low to the ground, fast, angling toward the station from the south. Then another, and another. Multiple contacts, he muttered into his mic, but there was no response. Radio static. He squinted through the lenses. These weren't wolves, too long in the body, too low in their gait. Their heat signatures twisted unnaturally as they moved. They weren't human either. He clicked off the binoculars, shouldering his rifle. And then, from somewhere in the white, he heard it. A howl. Deep. Wet. Not quite canine. Not quite anything. Lucas stepped back, breath frosting in the air. They were getting closer. And they didn't sound like they were alone. Lucas backed toward the hatch, boots crunching over the packed ice. The howl echoed again, closer this time, longer, like it was drawn out deliberately, a challenge or a signal. He slapped the hatch control. Nothing. Frozen. He cursed under his breath and jammed his gloved fingers beneath the seal, wrenching it open manually with a screech of metal and ice. Warm air hit his face like a breath from another world. He dove inside, slammed the hatch behind him, and twisted the manual lock. The hallway lights flickered, strip LEDs embedded in frosted panels. The station was quiet, except for the soft, erratic hiss of the furnace and the buzz of a distant generator struggling against the cold. "Curran," Lucas called, pulling his hood down. "We've got movement outside. Multiple heat signatures. South perimeter." No answer. He moved quickly, rifle in hand, down the narrow hall to the operations room. Curran sat at the comm desk, headphones around his neck, staring at static on the monitor like it had told him something terrible. "You hear me?" Lucas said. Curran didn't look away. His voice was thin, dry. "They were at the fence an hour ago. I saw them. Thought it was nothing at first. Thought it was just snowdrift or a fox maybe, but then it stood up." Lucas froze. "Stood up?" Curran slowly turned, pale as wax. Like it was, pretending to be an animal, but it wasn't. It looked at me, right at me, and smiled. Lucas felt his stomach knot. "Why didn't you say anything?" Curran's eyes drifted toward the floor. "I thought maybe I'd cracked. Seen too much. Too long out here." Lucas stepped to the monitor and flipped through the perimeter cameras. The feed glitched and stuttered, frames skipping like damaged film. Then one camera, South Post 3, caught a flicker of movement. A figure low to the ground, moving at an unnatural speed, limbs bending the wrong way. Then another. This one paused. The creature's head tilted toward the camera. The feed cut to black. Lucas looked at Curran. "We need to go topside. Now we lock down and signal McMurdo. Full evac protocol." Curran swallowed hard. "If they're inside the fence already." Lucas chambered around, jaw tight. Then we're not waiting for permission. Behind them, somewhere deep in the lower corridor, metal scraped against metal. Then came the sound of something breathing, long and slow. And it was coming from inside the station. Lucas raised his rifle instinctively, angling toward the sound. Curran stood frozen, eyes wide, lips twitching like he wanted to speak but couldn't force the words out. The breath came again, closer now, a slow, guttural exhale that vibrated in the vents, as if the air itself was being dragged through something alive. "The secondary hallway," Lucas muttered, eyes locked on the door across from Ops. "That connects to storage and the generator room. If they're inside, they came through there." He moved toward the door, boots silent on the floor. Curran followed, hesitantly. Lucas raised a finger, signaling for silence, then tapped the keypad to unlock the door. Nothing. The panel was dead. No lights, no beep. Just ice crusted around the edges, like the cold had seeped through the walls and killed it from within. Lucas took a half step back and nodded. "We do it hard." He shouldered the stock and kicked the door inward. It groaned open, revealing a corridor thick with shadow. The lights in this wing were dead. Frost crawled across the walls like veins. The air felt different here, heavier, tainted by something earthy and wet, like meat left out in the cold too long. They moved slowly, rifles up, sweeping side to side. Then Lucas froze. In the middle of the hall was a trail, not footprints, drag marks, like something had been pulled. The smears weren't red, they were black, oil thick and soaking into the tile like tar. Curran whispered, "That wasn't here earlier." From deeper in the dark, a low clicking sound began. Not mechanical, organic. A rhythm. 4 beats. Then pause. Then again, like nails or claws on tile. It was coming closer. Lucas crouched and braced his rifle, finger resting on the trigger. Then the hallway lights flickered. For just 1 second, he saw it, at the far end of the corridor, standing upright, covered in something pale and matted, like fur soaked in ice. Its limbs were long, its eyes glowing dull yellow in the dark. Its mouth opened, too wide, too wrong, and rows of thin teeth peeled back in a grin that wasn't meant for humans. Then the lights went out again, and the clicking turned into a run, straight toward them. "Down!" Lucas shouted, diving to the side just as the thing lunged from the dark. A blur of pale limbs and steam-soaked breath streaked past, crashing into the wall with a sound like wet leather. Curran screamed, fired a wild burst from his rifle, but the rounds smacked harmlessly into sheet metal. The creature vanished back into the dark, fast as it came. Lucas scrambled to his feet, eyes wide, breath clouding the frigid air. "Did you see that?" Curran gasped, backing up until he hit the wall. "Jesus, what the hell was that?" Lucas ignored him. He focused on the hallway. No movement now, no sound, but that didn't mean it was gone. "They're testing us," he said under his breath. "Like wolves, probing the fence, finding the weakest one." Curran's hands were shaking too hard to reload. Lucas took his rifle, ejected the half-empty mag, and slammed in a fresh one. He handed it back. "We need to get to the generator room," he said. "Lights, cameras, everything's dying. Whatever's out there knows we can't fight blind." They moved in tight formation down the corridor, muzzle flashes their only light, with each short burst fired into the darkness ahead. The air grew colder. Wrong, the kind of cold that crept into your bones. And then they saw it. The generator room door, wide open. Lucas cursed. Inside, the backup systems were shredded. Cables torn from the ceiling, fuel leaking across the floor. On the far wall, claw marks had gouged deep through the steel, as if something was trying to dig further in, or maybe out. Curran stepped forward, about to speak, when something crunched beneath his boot. A bone. Small. Human. They looked down. Half of a forearm lay beneath the console, stripped of flesh, frozen white. Curran gagged. "It's not just scientists anymore," Lucas said darkly. They've been inside. A scraping sound echoed above them. They both looked up. A vent. Open. Curran's eyes filled with panic. They're in the walls. Lucas raised his rifle. No, he said. They've always been. A sudden thud from the ceiling panel made them both freeze. Then another, heavier this time. Something was moving fast through the vent system, slamming against the sheet metal like it barely fit. Lucas stepped under the open vent, eyes tracing the dim edges of the shaft. He caught it, a flicker of movement. Then two long, pale fingers curled over the lip of the vent opening, their joints bending backward. Lucas didn't hesitate. He fired. The vent exploded with sparks and shrapnel, and whatever was inside let out a sound that didn't belong to anything on Earth. A howl and a shriek, tangled together. It dropped back into the shaft with a metallic screech, fleeing deeper into the ductwork. Curran backed away, pale and shaking. That's not a dog. That's not any kind of animal. No, Lucas said, still aiming upward. But it wants us to think it is. Curran blinked at him. What does that mean? Lucas lowered his rifle, lips tight. I've seen something like this before, back in Helmand, 2007. A village was wiped out in one night. Locals said they were attacked by hunters in skins. Everyone thought it was just Taliban propaganda, but the bodies, they looked just like the Norwegian team we found last week. Torn up, hollowed out, faces shredded like the thing wanted to wear them. Curran swallowed. Jesus. Lucas motioned him forward. Come on, we can't stay here. We need to reach the comms tower, the exterior line. It runs independent from internal power. That's through the old research wing. Lucas nodded. Yeah, which means if those things are nesting anywhere, it's there. They moved quickly now, adrenaline cutting through the cold, rifles up. Every hallway they passed seemed darker than the last. The emergency lights had fully died. The walls felt closer. The station had taken on a shape, not a place anymore, but something living. They passed the mess hall, silent, the bunks, empty, blankets still warm. Then the air changed again. A foul, sweet odor, like meat left in plastic under the sun. Curran covered his mouth. Ahead, a door hung half open. Research, West Block. Lucas signaled for silence. They moved in. And what they found stopped them both cold. Bodies, 5 of them, strung from the ceiling like meat in a butcher's shop, hung upside down, eyes wide open, mouths contorted mid-scream. Their chests had been cut open. But there was no blood. Only cold, black air. The smell was overpowering now, sickly sweet rot laced with metal and something almost chemical, like ammonia cooked in the cold. Lucas tried breathing through his mouth, but it didn't help. The stink sank into everything, his skin, his uniform, his teeth. Curran gagged, doubled over, and dry-heaved against the wall. Lucas turned away from the hanging corpses, scanning the room. The tables were overturned, equipment smashed. Bloodless surgical trays lay scattered on the floor. Someone had made a stand here, but it hadn't lasted long. These weren't just victims, Lucas muttered. They were studied. Curran wiped his mouth, voice thin. What the hell kind of station was this? Lucas moved to one of the counters, brushing snow dust off a file folder. The label was stamped with black ink. Period. Project Agni, Subsurface Species Observations. Restricted, Level 6 eyes only. He flipped it open. Inside were photos, blurry infrared stills of something big, fast, and barely humanoid. Clawed hands, slit pupils, and one frame, enhanced in red, with the word mimicry scrawled in the margin. The next page was worse. Initial specimens show coordinated hunting behaviors, preference for nocturnal movement, and low vocal frequencies similar to canine predation packs, capable of temporary vocal mimicry, no thermal signature during hibernation state, extremely dangerous. Lucas's hands tightened around the folder. This wasn't a weather station, he said. It was a listening post. They were studying these things, trying to contain them. Then what happened? Curran whispered. Lucas looked up at the hanging corpses, their frozen eyes still wet. They lost. A sudden clang rang out behind them, metal on tile. Curran spun, rifle raised. Something had moved in the shadows. The hallway they'd come from was now black. Then, a voice. High-pitched. Female. "Help me. Please." Curran gasped. That's Sandra. She was on the Norwegian team." "No," Lucas said. "She's dead." The voice came again. "Please, I'm hurt. I can't move." This time closer. Too close. "Let me in." Then the radio on Curran's vest came alive. Static. Then the same voice, in the exact same rhythm. "Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." Lucas yanked Curran backward just as the shape emerged from the dark. It wasn't walking. It was crawling. And it wore Sandra's face. The thing's face peeled back as it crawled, skin stretching in unnatural ways, like it was being worn too tight. The eyes didn't blink. The mouth moved with perfect imitation, but the voice had no breath behind it, like a recording echoing through raw muscle. Curran froze, rifle shaking. "Sandra?" "No." Lucas shoved him aside and opened fire. The bullets tore into the creature's shoulder, knocking it back against the wall. But it didn't scream. It just twitched. Then it rolled to its side and scrambled away into the dark on all fours, its limbs bending in jerking, sickening angles. Curran collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. That wasn't possible. It's never been about possible, Lucas growled, yanking him up. "They learn our shapes, our words. They get close, so you drop your guard. Don't ever let them speak to you." They backed into the research lab, sealing the heavy door with a manual bar latch. The room held rows of freezers, sealed crates, and computers that flickered in and out with flickering backup power. Lucas locked his rifle against his shoulder and moved to one of the central computers. He tapped at the console, wiping frost from the screen. It blinked to life. Project Agni, access log. Last entry, 3 days ago. Note: specimen behavior increasingly aggressive following thaw cycle. Second containment breach suspected. Personnel advised to evacuate and disable remaining communications equipment to limit exposure. Curran muttered. "They didn't want help." "No," Lucas said. "They wanted to bury it." Outside, something thudded hard against the metal door. Once. Twice. Then a pause. Then 5 knocks. Perfectly spaced. Perfectly human. Curran looked to Lucas, voice trembling. "Do we open it?" "No," Lucas said, staring at the door. "Because whoever's knocking knows the rhythm of a human hand." The lights flickered again, and for a moment, the air inside the room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. Curran whispered, "What if there's no one left but us?" Lucas stepped back from the console and turned toward the window. There, across the snowfield, under the swirling white, stood 8 shapes. All still. All facing the station. And all wearing faces that looked almost right. Too right. Like they were waiting to be led inside. Lucas stared out at the figures in the snow. They didn't move, didn't sway in the wind. Just stood there like mannequins dressed in skin, each one a distorted echo of someone who'd lived or worked at the station, a scientist, a medic, a young soldier who'd gone missing 2 weeks ago, all of them dead and now standing. Curran was whispering to himself, repeating, "This isn't real, this isn't real," but Lucas didn't waste time trying to ground him. He had seen this pattern before, in combat zones, where the enemy didn't wear a uniform, where the battlefield got inside your head and made you question your own name. He turned from the window. "We make for the comms tower, now, while it's still dark, while they're still watching instead of coming." Curran snapped out of it, eyes wide. "You want to go out there?" "We stay here, we die," Lucas said. "We need to make contact with McMurdo. If we can get word out, someone can bury this place for good." Another thud hit the door, this time not a knock, more like something ramming it. The door shook, dust spilled from the frame. Then a voice hissed through the vent. "Let us in. We're so cold." Lucas didn't speak. He just raised his rifle, aimed at the ceiling, and fired. The vent shrieked with movement. Something fast and spider-like skittered away into the ducts. Curran flinched. "They're everywhere." "They always were," Lucas muttered. He moved to the back of the lab and kicked open a side panel, an old maintenance hatch, mostly forgotten, buried behind shelves. A narrow crawl space, lined with frost and stale air, led beneath the structure toward the old snowmobile bay. He looked at Curran. "You want to live? Get in. Quiet. No hesitation. Don't stop moving." Curran hesitated, just for a second. And that's when the main door behind them let out a high-pitched creak. Not broken. Unlocked. Lucas shoved Curran through the hatch and followed, pulling the panel closed behind them just as the door to the lab slowly swung open. And footsteps, bare and wet, entered the room they'd just left. They crawled through the freezing tunnel in silence, lit only by Lucas's chest-mounted flashlight. Frost formed on their sleeves. The air was metallic and tight. Halfway through, Lucas heard something behind them in the crawl space. A second pair of hands. Closer than they should be. Lucas halted, heart hammering against the inside of his ribs. The sound wasn't loud, just the soft, deliberate drag of fingers over metal, not frantic, not chasing, crawling, like whatever was behind them knew they couldn't move fast in this tunnel, like it was enjoying the hunt. Curran turned his head slightly, his eyes wide and panicked in the dim light. Lucas mouthed, "Don't move." The tunnel was barely 3 feet high. Any wrong sound would echo straight down its length. He turned his light off. Total darkness swallowed them. The air felt like glass pressed to their skin. The thing behind them stopped. For a moment, all was still. Then it began to speak. Not a growl, not a hiss. A voice. "Lucas. Don't leave me here, Lucas. You left me at Helmand, remember?" His breath caught. His fingers tensed on the grip of his sidearm. That voice wasn't just a guess. It was a name from the past. Someone he'd actually left behind. He didn't respond. He just motioned for Curran to keep moving. The tunnel sloped downward slightly, then curved left. The scraping behind them stopped. Silence pressed in. Lucas forced himself forward, inch by inch, muscles trembling not from cold, but from control. Then, light. A pale blue glow filtered ahead from a vent grill. The snowmobile bay. Lucas tapped Curran's boot, pointed. Curran nodded and pushed forward until he could kick out the grate. The wind howled in from outside, welcome and real. They dropped out into the bay, landing hard on cold concrete. The scent of gasoline and rust hit them like old breath. 3 snowmobiles sat in the center of the garage, one already half-packed from a previous supply run. Lucas moved fast, yanking open the fuel line on the nearest one and checking for a pulse of pressure. Good. Still viable. Curran spun toward the wall, spotting the exterior door. "It's frozen shut." Lucas pointed to the emergency override lever above it. "Cut the seal with that, then push." A loud clang echoed from behind them. The tunnel grate. It had been pushed open, but nothing climbed out. Instead, Lucas heard something hit the roof. A soft thump, then another. Something was above them. Then came the sound of many hands, skittering across the steel like an insect's legs magnified to human scale. Curran yanked the lever. Steam hissed as the hydraulic locks released. The metal door groaned. Snow spilled in. Lucas threw himself onto the nearest snowmobile. And from above, something dropped, landing behind them with a wet, solid thud. He didn't look. He didn't speak. He just hit the throttle. The door opened wide, and they vanished into the white. The snowmobile screamed to life beneath Lucas as he tore out into the blizzard, head ducked low against the wind. Curran followed close behind, engine whining in protest as it kicked up sheets of powder. Visibility was barely 10 feet. The headlights cut through white chaos. No horizon, no sky, just the endless frozen void. Lucas kept his bearings by instinct, steering south-southwest toward the external comms tower. It was 1.5 miles from the station, mounted on a reinforced ridge above the glacier shelf. If they could reach it, they might get a clean signal to McMurdo, or at least trigger the fail-safe beacon buried in the rock. Behind them, the wind carried unnatural howls. Some high and distant. Some almost close enough to be whispered. Curran shouted over the engine. "You think they're chasing?" "They're always chasing," Lucas yelled back, not looking. "Just keep moving. Don't stop for anything." Minutes passed in a blur. Lucas's fingers were going numb on the handlebars. He could feel the ice forming around the seams of his mask, but then, finally, a break in the white. A jagged silhouette emerged ahead, the tower. It loomed like a grave marker jutting from the earth, antennas and signal dishes coated in frost. Lucas pulled hard to the left, skidding to a stop at the base. He leapt off and ran to the service ladder bolted to the structure's spine. Curran pulled up beside him, panting, eyes darting into the storm. "I'll cover," he said, voice shaking. "You get the signal up." Lucas nodded once and climbed. Each rung bit into his gloves with cold steel teeth. The wind howled harder the higher he went, rocking the tower with every gust. At the top, the control panel sat behind a sealed hatch. He yanked it open, praying the battery backup still held charge. The screen flickered once. Then again. Then green. Calm. Uplink ready. Lucas didn't waste time. He typed a single phrase. Period. Station Morrow compromised. Evac immediate. Non-human hostiles. Repeat. Non-human. Burn everything. He hit send. Nothing happened. Then, a single confirmation ping blinked. Signal sent. He let out a breath. Then the tower shuddered. Something was climbing after him. The metal vibrated. A hand, long, too long, curled over the rung below his foot. Then another. Then 3. He looked down and saw it. No face this time. No mimicry. Just raw flesh stretched over a skull like wax. Empty sockets where eyes should be. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, too many for any creature on Earth. It smiled up at him and spoke with his own voice. "You should have stayed buried, Lucas." Lucas didn't respond. He drew his sidearm with a steady hand and fired point-blank into the creature's face. The shot cracked through the cold, and the thing's head snapped back, flesh folding and unfolding like it didn't quite know how to die. It let out a wet shriek and lost its grip, tumbling backward down the tower's spine, bouncing off the rungs in a blur of pale limbs and black blood. Lucas clung to the metal railing, breathing hard, the wind tearing at his coat. Below, the shape hit the snow with a sickening crunch and went still. But it didn't stay still. It twitched. Then it began to rise again, slowly, deliberately, bones snapping into place, like branches bending under pressure. Lucas clambered down the ladder as fast as he could without losing his grip. Halfway down, he saw Curran standing beside the snowmobiles, rifle raised, firing into the dark. Figures were moving through the whiteout, not running, walking. Not in any rush. Like they knew. He hit the ground running. Signals out. Backup's coming. But we have to hold. Curran fired again. How many? Lucas grabbed the rifle from the sled pack, eyes scanning the blizzard. Too many. Through the snow, he saw them more clearly now, at least 8, maybe more, fanning out in a slow semicircle, each one a different shape, a different stolen face, some still fresh, some clearly decaying. They weren't in a hurry because they had the advantage. They were hunting cornered prey. "They're going to surround us," Curran breathed. No, Lucas said. They're hurting us. Curran blinked. To what? Yeah. That's when the ground cracked beneath them. A deep, shuddering pop echoed from under the snow. Then another. The ice shifted at the edges of the ridge, sloughing off in long, groaning fractures. Lucas stepped back, eyes wide. They weren't the only ones moving. Beneath the glacier, something was waking up. The creatures stopped moving. They stood still in the snow, listening, as if answering a voice only they could hear. Then, together, they turned their heads south toward the crevasse and began to walk, one by one, into the dark. Curran stared. What the hell are they doing? Lucas didn't answer, because deep below the surface, something massive was shifting, and the ice was beginning to split. The ice groaned beneath their boots like the earth itself was cracking open. Lucas felt it vibrate through his bones, a deep, slow pulse, steady and ancient, like something buried for centuries had just taken its first breath.